Welcome to Senior Bitches, where we celebrate the magical universe of women over 55. Okay, today's guest to me is fascinating on so many levels. Her life thus far has been big and wide and far-reaching. From the most humble of beginnings to the top of the mountain, occupying rarefied territory in a world sprinkled with rock stars, movie stars, fame, fortune, beauty, access, excess to it all, only to be matched with the valleys of unimaginable heartache, crushing losses, paralyzing self-doubt, and fear ingrained deeply in trauma. All of this leading to the gift of ultimately finding the power in her own voice in the most beautiful and pure way by ushering her sweet friend through her journey to the most sacred of places. She does this all with an open heart and shares her journey with us through her talent for the written word in her books, My Journey with Farah, A Story of Life, Love, and Friendship, and her kick-ass memoir, Rearview Mirror. I am so thrilled to get this time, so please welcome the luminous and inspirational Alana Stewart.
Oh my gosh, I've never had such a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. The only thing is, I'm not 50 yet. I'm just kidding.
I know, honey. I know you're not, but we thought we'd make a special exception and have you on the show. Is that okay?
I have to tell you one quick thing to do with that. Deepak Chopra told me when I turned 50 that he said, Alana, throw out the number. Don't think of yourself as an age anymore. He said, think of yourself as being ageless, and you will be. And he added, he said, you know, if you ask me my age right now, I probably couldn't even remember it because I don't keep track of it. This was Deepak talking. And so ever since he told me that, I've done that. And I don't think of myself as a number. I just don't. I think of myself as being ageless, and hopefully I will be.
Well, it's timeless to me. It's just timeless. There's no start, there's no finish. And I'm looking at you now visually, and you are stunning. And you are just a beautiful woman. I'm not even going to say the word, but you really are. So congratulations on that, because that is, yeah. And I always believe it's an inside job. So the inside beauty comes out, and you can see that with you. Definitely.
Oh, so kind. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So I spent the weekend with you. I spent 3 days with you reading your books, My Journey with Farah and your memoir, Rearview Mirror. And it was just a space for me that was a beautiful place of introspection and self-examination, because the deep dive you did into your story with Farah and also your own life, you were so vulnerable and so open. And I related to your journey in so many aspects. I mean, I'm a single mom as well, but I think so many women relate to it. And your journey to me in your books is really to yourself. It's to that love that we need to have for ourselves before we can be really effective in the world, that it really is an inside job. And I didn't even know that till 2 years ago, until I started kind of intense spiritual, intellectual therapy. And my friend said, it's an inside job. And I said, it is? I didn't even know that. I didn't.
Yeah, that's a term I've heard for years, because in 12-step programs, something they talk about a lot. It's an inside job, and it really is, and it's a long journey. I don't think I even started it until I was 40. I think it was really after my second divorce, when I was 40 and trying to raise 3 kids on my own, and I kind of was forced to go deeper, to survive and to raise my kids and to learn how to be a better parent, because I didn't grow up with parenting skills, as you know, if you read my book.
Yeah.
So I was kind of winging it, and it was a long road. I mean, I'm still not there. We're all works in progress, I think, until we, that final moment. So I'm still work on myself every day. I have to just to get up and get dressed and go out in the world.
Yeah. And it really is an internal dialogue. It's the most important dialogue is the one you have with yourself. And, your own personal trajectory from abject poverty and growing up with a mother who had addiction issues, to, really a couple of decades later operating in the world of absolute privilege. And you grew up in such fear and uncertainty. And it's amazing to me that at 14 months old, you had a vivid memory of fear. Like I can't remember anything before 10. It's bizarre. But in your book, you said at 14 months, you had a feeling of fear being with your mom. I mean, what a point of origination for you in life to have that.
I still see that in my mind. And I mean, I remember things from very young, from 3, from 2, from and then sometimes I can't remember what I did yesterday. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting, but I do remember that very vividly. I was on a train with my mother and she was holding me, and the train was going from California to Texas. She was going back to her home in Texas. And I had been born in California, but we were, Texans. But the train was going over one of those high trestles, and she was holding me up to the window. I guess she thought I'd enjoy that. And I just looked down and there was nothing there. There was nothing because you couldn't see the tracks and it was just space below. And I started screaming and crying, and my mother didn't know what to do with me. It's so funny that I don't remember every detail. I don't remember anything after that. I just remember that moment.
It's such a primal emotion. And so who was that little girl who started your incredible journey years ago? Who was that little girl in Texas? Who was she?
Well, my mother took me to live with my grandmother and in a little town called Nacogdoches, and we lived out in the country in a little, very small little house with no running water, no toilet, we had an outhouse in the back. And my mother went to Houston, which was the biggest city near there. It was like 120 miles away. And she would sometimes come and visit on weekends. And I would, as you probably read in my book, that was like the high point of my life. When I was 3 or 4, was waiting for my mom to come and visit. But I didn't really particularly know we were poor. It's just the way we lived, and my grandmother was a wonderful woman. She was very religious. She had a strong based faith. She wasn't incredibly demonstrative no one back then talked about anything emotional or, there was like, no one talked about feelings.
No, not in my house either, ever.
No. So if
This wasn't a discussion.
You didn't even, kind of know how to deal with them. It was just a feeling. And looking back, I realized I had a lot of fear about a lot of things. I remember being chased by a pack of dogs from the neighbors across the street once. But I was very, I was very enterprising. I was 5 years old and there was a fence and I ran to the fence and I climbed up the fence, a chain link fence to get on to the top away from the dogs. So I was always afraid of dogs after that. Little things happen to you or big things. And you remember them the rest of your life. They go into some kind of subconscious memory somewhere, some slot, and those, that comes back, and you're afraid of strange dogs.
Yeah, it makes sense. But those are mad survival skills. So you had survival skills at a young age, would you say? Because your environment was ever changing, right? You're back and forth between your grandmother and Houston and your mom's different husbands, and then settling into a school and then being uprooted. So there has to be some coping mechanisms that you had to survive that type of uncertainty.
Yes, and I was an only child. And I think I don't know what coping mechanisms I had, but looking back, I think I must have had some kind of inner strength that I was born with, because I've had therapists tell me that I should either be a drug addict or dead.
And you're neither, by the way.
Because of my childhood. And I don't say that to feel sorry for myself, it was, I think somehow maybe it was my grandmother that instilled it in me, because my grandmother was a very strong, principled woman. As I said, we lived out in the country. We were very poor. She slept with a 38 next to her bed. And
you still do, right? Do you, in your drawer?
I do.
I know. I know. I read that. I was like, she's so badass.
I
Go
do.
on. I'm hanging on every word. I love this. Go.
There was kind of a badass in her own way. She wasn't afraid of anything, or at least she didn't show it, you know.
Yeah.
She would pick that gun up and go out back if there was a noise, you know, and we really, there was no lights outside, nothing. It was just the dark. She'd walk right outside with that 38, and, you know, she didn't seem to fear anything. So, you know, I must have gotten some genes from her, because even though I did fear things, a lot of things, I was able to get on with life. There was sort of this thing in me that was always get on with it, you know, just get on with it and shove that over there and just
Right.
get on and just get on with life, with what you're doing,
Right.
with what you have
Put
to do.
it in that box. And it's interesting because obviously survival skills, and your grandmother was so down to earth and so different, I guess, from your mom, but you were also a caregiver at such an early age, you know, with your mom. So that is, I mean, reading that in your book, it was just, it was just heartbreaking, you know, and when she didn't show up for your graduation, all these things go through my mind as a single mom, because we have to cover so much stuff all the time, you know, and just you taking such beautiful care of your mom at such a young age.
Well, you know, again, it's something that I didn't really think about. It was something that I kind of, as I said, I was an only child, and my mother was really good until about the time I was 9 or 10. And that's when things started going downhill, and she started using a lot of prescription drugs. And that's when things started to turn and change. And then there would be periods of time. She was married then to my stepfather, her fourth husband, but I really loved him. He was really a good man. And unfortunately he was an alcoholic. But he was a good man with a good heart. He thought of me as his daughter. And I always thought of him as my dad. And he was good. He didn't know what to do with my mother, though. He just didn't know how to deal with
Well, the
that.
interesting thing about your mom, what I understand, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, she just had an opioid addiction. I mean, I don't know what she was given opioids for, but they treated it like mental illness, right? And I think you said in the book, but she actually had an addiction to opioids, right? So they didn't.
We didn't know it in those days, you know what it was.
Right.
She was, I think my mother, I think it was emotional, and I think maybe it was some kind of brain chemistry, you know, and she was trying to self-medicate. Maybe she had terrible anxiety and fear herself, and that was a way of escaping it. But she escaped, you know, she wanted to like escape life. And when things weren't, you know, she'd be happy when she was married and everything was great in the beginning, and then it would start to fall apart. And that's when she sort of turned to the pills, the drugs and everything. And then it just escalated, and, you know, to the point of where she just locked herself in her room and didn't come out. And I kind of raised myself from about the age of 12 on.
Yeah, you did. And then propelled yourself out of that life. You got yourself out of that town. I guess when you know, things happened prior to that, but you were propelled to, did you feel that you were destined for larger things? Did you feel that there was a destiny in front of you that you wanted to grab, or did you just kind of roll into it?
You know, it's interesting because when I was very young, like I remember I was around 7 years old, and I saw a picture, and we didn't really have many magazines and things, you know, like that, but we had the Sears and Roebuck catalog. But somewhere, and we didn't have a television either. And I don't know where I saw it, but somewhere I saw a picture of a Thunderbird. And I thought, oh, that's the most beautiful car I've ever seen. And one day I want to grow up and have a Thunderbird. And it's just a thought that went through my mind. And I used to, when I was in high school, there was a girl whose family was quite wealthy, and they gave her a Thunderbird, a baby blue Thunderbird for her,
Wow.
like her
Wow.
16th birthday or something like that. I was so envious, you know. I always wanted I never got a Thunderbird, by the way.
Never?
No,
That's interesting.
never got
Wow.
a Thunderbird,
I
but
wonder why.
I had some other cool cars.
Yeah. It
So,
seems like you might have had some pretty good cars along the way.
over the years.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think you just, people either, I think when you grow up like that, you either drink or become a drug addict, or you look for something to cling on to. And I think on some level, I did have faith. As I said, my grandmother had a very strong faith. And when we could get away into town, we would go to church. And somehow that gave me some kind of a foundation. I think without my grandmother, God only knows what would have happened. But my mother and my stepfather, when they brought me to Houston, and that's where I lived from like the time I was 9 on. But I would go back and spend a lot of time with my grandmother in Nacogdoches. And there were times when I would end up going back there and going to school for
Right.
time.
Right. Bounced around a lot. That's a very strong background, though. Like with a woman like that who's got the 38 and she's heading outside to deal with stuff, that's a strong female role model. And obviously the discussions you had or she had with you around purity and sex were very, really resonated with you. So she obviously was a huge force. A huge force.
She was very, I just remember her telling me when I was very young that, you don't kiss a boy unless you're engaged. And I mean, she was very old fashioned. I mean, she did not even like my mother, my uncles, when, they were grown and they'd all be at her house. They'd have to sneak outside to have a beer. She had very strict principles.
She laid down the law. Well, that's exactly what you needed. She gave you. So just forwarding a little. So here you are, young and beautiful, and being romanced by one of the biggest rock stars in the world after being married to one of the most handsome actors of all time, and George Hamilton. And by the way, I was obsessed with your talk show, and I want you guys to reboot it. I think you should definitely do it again. We need that. We need that presence in our culture. People over 60, or I don't want to use a number, but incredible chemistry. I love that show.
I had so much fun doing that talk show with him, even though we argued like crazy. But we really had a great time, and we had some really fun times and great guests on. And there's nothing I'd love to do more, but what networks and things are like. They don't want.
I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. I was talking to my friends about this because everybody remembers your talk show, and the chemistry you guys had was insane, and it was just beautiful. And what makes more sense than having a demographic where you spend money? Okay, let's just say over 50. Let's give you that demographic of having these incredibly fabulous, wonderful people who have lived through some of the most interesting times, are still radiate health and sexuality and all these wonderful things. Why can't we have that? I don't get it. I don't get it.
As good as mine. I don't either. But I even had someone, an agent, a very big agent actually, who's not my agent, but kind of a friend, and she loves my Instagram, for example. She follows me and she loves my cooking videos and things. And she said, I think you should have a cooking show. Would you be interested? I said, yeah, absolutely. And so she went to her people, at the agency. This is one of the biggest agencies in town, the people here in LA and New York. And they were looking for younger demographics. They were not interested. So I've been used to a lot of, my life was not, you get rejected a lot. So like, I know we fast forwarded to the men and the marriages and everything, but just in between there, I just want to say, when I went to New York to model, I didn't think I was pretty. I mean, there were periods, I go through periods where I think I was pretty, and then some photographer would take horrible pictures of me and I'd look at them and I go, oh, I'm really ugly. So I was kind of based on, whatever. I didn't have any deep inner sense of myself, let's put it that way. And so I got turned down a lot. I mean, as most people do. I mean, there's some girls that walk into the offices of Vogue and, they're on the cover of Vogue the next week because Diana Vreeland loved them and loved
right.
them. That didn't happen with me. I had to go through the whole process of, going and interviewing for jobs and trying to get photographers to hire me. And so it seemed then it seemed like it was forever, but looking back, it was not. It was like within the course of a year, I was working and starting to do good jobs.
Right, right, that whole period. And I say this with
I
all
got a
due
lot of
respect.
rejection, a
I know.
lot of
And by the way,
rejection. So
your Scavulo photos are those that, is it, am I pronouncing it correctly?
yes,
Where, oh my God, we're just timeless. And with all due respect, the men you've been with are wonderful. They're almost the least interesting part of your story. So I want to make that clear to anybody listening.
thank you.
They're just sort of like these conduits for you. But I mean, really, it's your story that's so interesting. And yeah, you did get rejected. I've done 1,000 episodes of cooking shows. That's actually how I started. I write
Really?
cookbooks and doing cooking shows, and that's my passion. That's my passion. But I am really over this whole ageism thing. Like, oh, that we're supposed to just sort of exit the building at a certain age and we're not viable. Well, aren't we the people spending money? Doesn't that make sense that you have people on TV who are like us? Is that far-fetched?
I've never understood it. It's like I remember when at one point in my life I was writing scripts with Carol Bayer Sager, and I wrote
Right.
a couple of scripts together. And we had this great idea about a script that would take place in Hollywood. And it was it was a crazy idea. It was about a Hollywood agent, basically. It was very funny. And I remember Leonard Goldberg telling us, you can't do movies about Hollywood. Nobody will buy a movie about Hollywood. Well, then until Robert Altman made a movie about Hollywood. And now how many movies have there been about Hollywood? Big movies.
A million. So to your point, when I was reading your book, which I loved, is that you had an idea for a movie that I think just made $100 million or more, with the 4 women going to Italy, right? I think Jane Fonda was a book club, right? They all went over there and they're all over 70, 75, and it was a massive hit. So was 80 for Brady.
I know. Listen, I will never forget. And I know that I mean, I'm not taking credit for it, but when George and I finished, when our talk show ended, I was thinking of, well, what can I do next? What can we do next? And I said, it'd be a great idea to get like 3 or 4 women together and do a show. Well, hello, The View. I mean, it's exactly what I wanted to do. Talk about politics, talk about things that affect women. And I even talked to a couple of people about it, and it ended up not going anywhere. But then The View happened.
That View. Well, you had great ideas, and there's still great ideas. And by the way, anybody listening, those movies, is it Grace and Frankie, L'Oreal ambassadors are in their 60s, 70s. Like, I think that the media really has to start listening to this narrative, because there's a beautiful space for us to do this, It's
Yeah,
kind of
and
a
I
good
think
idea.
and I like your thought, your idea about George and I doing another talk show, because nothing I'd love more. I mean, we did an infomercial together not that long ago, and we kind of did it. There was no script or anything. It was like loving hands at home, these people. And anyway, we just kind of fell into our old pattern, our talk show thing, and it really turned out quite good.
Well, you guys have incredible chemistry, and I don't want to dwell too much on the men, but the Rod Stewart thing is interesting, that you talked that was sort of an obsession. We don't even have to go into it, but this George Hamilton thing, because your friendship and your love for each other is so present, and your friction and your agitation, it's so fun to watch. And I really do believe that it would be revolutionary to have a talk show with the 2 of you doing it in that age bracket, and look at both of you and the lives you've lived and what you would bring to the table. It's just, honestly, I'll sign a petition for it. Just tell me where to sign up. I would love it.
I wish I knew. Yeah, I mean, and both of us are really, from the time we met, we were kind of obsessed with new health things and health remedies and, the latest supplements and things. And I think it kind of shows that, that we've been able to stay fairly healthy and to look fairly healthy, and at our ages. And we would have a lot to say in that area for sure. And a lot of areas, I would imagine.
It's also glamorous. It's elegant. And that's so missing in our culture. I want to see something lovely and flowing and, not at odds. So I'm starting a petition in my spare time for that. But there's one man I want to talk to you about because I'm obsessed. May I?
Who is it?
Okay, my favorite place on earth is Ravello.
Oh my gosh.
And one of my favorite writers is Gore Vidal. And the fact that you were speaking about your friendship with him and your visits to Ravello, Ravello is so deep in my heart. Like I want to end up there one day, but I was obsessed with his house when I was there, and you had a friendship with him.
It gives me chills to think, because I haven't been back to Ravello since the last time I stayed at his house there. And he and his partner Howard were very, very good friends of mine. And I had met Gore when George and I were married, when we were doing a play in Chicago, and we were in the pump room, and he came in, and George and he knew each other for years, and he sat down with us and we struck up this friendship, which was really bizarre. He was so brilliant. I'm not brilliant. I mean, I'm just not in his realm. And politically we couldn't be more opposite, but we struck up this friendship and we were always friends. And I went a few times and visited him at their wonderful home in Ravello. And I haven't been back since. It almost brings tears to my eyes. It was so beautiful, and time passes too quickly,
Yeah,
I
it does.
never want to, I think Mike told me during the break that you had gone to Rome and spent a month there. And if you ever want a partner to travel to Italy with you, I love Italy. I would love to spend a month in Italy more than anything in life.
Italy is my jam. And I sort of had like an implosion happen in my life, a big implosion, a big life reset in the fall where everything fell away, And talking to one of my friends about it, she said, good, life is serving you a gift right now. It's all going. So it's a gift on a platter. So you learn from this. And I thought, I'm going to go to Rome for 2 months on my own. I don't speak the language, and I'm going to go and immerse myself in beauty because that city is so beautiful and tortured and the history of it. And I'm going to go and sit in it and I'm going to experience. And I went for 2 months on my own. Loved it.
That's amazing. That's impressive. I spent a lot of time in Italy on my own when I was modeling, I will say, and I would go in restaurants at night and sit by myself for lunch, and
Me too.
It didn't bother me. But I think a lot of women would be very hesitant to do that. I'm not even sure how I'd feel about doing it today. I have to tell you the truth. So I think you're very brave.
Well, I loved it. And I would go to my local sports bar to watch football, and I met some friends there and, hung out. And yeah, but it was the most profound thing that I could do for myself to do that and have that time period. And, when I think of Ravello, I think I want to end up there one day. Like there's something about it that's so sweet and beautiful, and unique. It's magical. But anyway, I just loved reading that about you and Gore Vidal. Enough with the men. Let's move on to your book, My Journey with Farah, which I absolutely loved. You obviously had this incredible friendship with her. She was your soul sister. One of the most beautiful women in the world, getting the most horrendous cancer, anal cancer. Like just, how does this happen to her? And you were with her throughout the journey. And I heard you speaking about the Texan pathology you guys have together, the culture, and there was just this bond between the two of you. And you guided her through her diagnosis, prognosis, and ultimately her death. And I think of that phrase that she used, sweetened by risk. And she talked about that. And at that stage in the journey in the book, you were kind of the opposite of the sweetened by risk. And I relate to this. You were kind of fear oriented. You were coming from a place of fear. And she was like, to the wind about it. And what incredible gifts you gave each other during this journey, this journey you had with her. It was just incredibly beautiful to read.
Well,
just beautiful.
It certainly, and that wasn't even meant to be a book. Those were my diaries, and I was just keeping a diaries about it. About the trip. Never even occurred to me that it would be a book. I knew I wanted to write a book eventually, a memoir. But I didn't even think about that. And she was the last person in the world you would ever think that would get cancer. I mean, she was so strong and so vital and such a presence. And And yet cancer doesn't pick favorites, it can happen to anybody. It changed my life so profoundly. It's not something I ever even imagined doing. My grandmother died of colon cancer, but it happened. She had it and she was treated, and then she was fine, and then she had a reoccurrence, and by the time they called me, she was dying. And so I was never there, like taking care of her or spending a lot of time with, because she lived in Texas. I was living in Los Angeles, and I didn't get back there enough. But it was very different. So with Vera, it was so, it was so close because we went to Germany so many times together. And sometimes I have to say, even though she was battling this dreadful cancer, sometimes it was like we were two girlfriends on a trip together. We actually had fun. I know that sounds strange, but she was a fun-loving person. She loved to laugh. She loved to have a good time. And we would find things to laugh about. And I mean, just the craziest things in this foreign country where we didn't speak English, at this little clinic in the middle of nowhere. But she was amazing. She was so courageous. And I remember once she started to cry and she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cry." And I went, "Are you crazy? You're like the bravest person I've ever met." I mean, I don't think I could have gone through a lot of the things that she went through. But it really changed my life radically, because it just made me understand how precious life is, what a gift it is, how you have to be in the moment, not live in the present, not live in the future, not live in the past, because we don't know what the future is going to be. I mean, she was doing, fine. I mean, she had a wonderful life, and in many aspects, some wasn't, some parts of it weren't so wonderful. But suddenly this deadly disease just over, one day her life changed in a doctor's office. And it can happen to any of us, I mean, I just think we have to be so grateful for life. And I don't always think that way, but it's my deeper philosophy. And because we all go through horrendous things in life, and ups and downs, but we have to try to live in the present. And I think we have to try to learn to be kinder to others too. I think that's something that I've just learned over the years, how important it is to be compassionate and to look at things through someone else's eyes, which is something most of us don't do enough. I've also done Marianne Williamson's Course in Miracles.
Course in Miracles. Yeah. I'm going to ask you about that. Yeah. I met her.
I do the daily lesson every day.
Yeah.
And it just makes me remember that we're all connected, and how important it is to, like, sometimes something will happen that'll really piss me off, in work or personal life or something. And I'll just want to like tell somebody off because they haven't, they've acted inappropriately, or they're not doing the right thing. And I just sort of stop myself, and I've been able to go, okay, you know what, take a deep breath, put it in God's hands, and let's see what happens with this, and not react, not like react immediately. And every time I do that, the problem gets resolved in a way that maybe I couldn't have even figured out.
Because you made a choice. And it's this whole thing about being triggered. Everybody's triggered, because, and to your point, what you've been talking about, like the inside job, like pain is hard going down and it's hard going up, but you have to exercise it, right? And there was a cool passage in your book. I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was Robert, and he was a healer. And he was talking about this. And I've talked a lot about this lately. We have to go through the pain of it, because we're just carrying around these little time bombs, and the pain will not kill you if you acknowledge it and you go through it. It's going to pass, but we're so scared of that. And everybody's just so triggered and divisive. And it's because we're not living in the moment. we're not there, and we're not really so okay inside, you know, and that's a lifelong process to get there.
It
And
will kill you, is the thing. It will kill you, or it'll make you very ill if you don't do
yes,
it. And that's something I learned, I think probably right after Rod and I divorced, because I was devastated and
can I ask you a question about that? One question about that, because that relationship, so different than George, and looking at it, the trauma around that and the obsession and stuff, was it shame that was coming up with him? What emotion was coming up with him? Because definitely there seemed to be that relationship really hit a trigger point or some point of your pain or trauma, maybe a bit more than George or something, but it seemed a different type of behavior. I wonder what it was that you were experiencing.
Well, I know exactly what it was. First of all, I'd never dealt with my mother, or I never dealt with a lot of stuff. I just shoved it down and kept going and did
Mhm.
not deal with it. And I owe him a big debt of gratitude, because it was a huge abandonment for me. And it brought up all the abandonment of my mother, which I had never dealt with, and my mother's death, which I'd never dealt with. And so I had to start going into that stuff and examining it and talking to, therapy and 12-step programs. And I had a lot of deep, deep, deep healing to do, because I had really pushed that stuff down. I had never dealt with it. And if I hadn't have had that very painful breakup, I still wouldn't have dealt with it. I would have just kept on my merry way and just kept going.
Yeah.
Something happened that, it was like Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall.
There was something happened there, because what that energy, and is it abandonment? This is my question. Is it abandonment or not being chosen? Or maybe it's the same thing, because I think a lot of women, yeah, it's the same thing.
And abandonment,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's what I had felt as a young child, over and over again. And it just brought it all up, and it had to be dealt with. And it was a good thing, because it changed me and in a profound way, and it helped to make me who I am today, and it helped me to become a better mother, and a better human being, and a kinder, more compassionate human being.
Yeah. That's what good lessons do, though, right? That's what they do. They
Yeah, but
change your trajectory.
sure are hateful at the time,
Oh, they suck. They're horrible. And when my friend was saying life is serving you a platter of blessings, I'm like, I swear on my podcast, but I don't think you're a swearer, so I'm not going to swear. But
Oh,
I
I
said,
swear all the time. Are you kidding me?
okay, so I said, go fuck yourself. This was Ray Don Chong. Do you know Ray Don Chong?
I do. I don't know her well, but I do know her from years ago from Richard Perry.
Yeah, so she's giving me this lecture. Oh, life is serving you up this beautiful lesson. I'm like, fuck you. I don't want this lesson. I don't want it.
If I'm allowed to swear, then I want to say, someone said to me, well, it's a if one more person said to me, this is a learning lesson in life. I said, I don't want to hear about one more fucking learning lesson. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm done. I'm learned up to here. I'm learned up to here.
Don't serve me anymore.
I'm done with this shit. And again, like, your story resonated with me so much. One of my best friends is terminal with cancer. Beautiful woman. And she also check this out, Alana. She also, her son was, her son was murdered in February. So she lost her son, and she's battling cancer. And to your point, last night I FaceTimed with her drinking, and we laughed. We laughed. Like, we'd go from grief to laughing to, having these profound discussions, because I said to her, your grief is so large, right? And she wants to address the grief, but she's dealing with chemo. So I'm like, maybe you put your grief over here, and don't feel guilty that you can't dive into that right now. Maybe cut yourself a break. And she's like, I want to cut myself a break. But, to your point, like, and I'm wondering with Farah, did you have discussions around death? Did she want to discuss that, or was that defeatist for her? Or
we never, ever discussed the possibility of her dying.
Okay.
Anything, because she was determined to live, and I was determined right along with her. And that she did say a couple of times, maybe during the last year or 6 months of her life, she said, when I have 2 months left, I want to know it because I've got to get my affairs in order.
Right.
But nobody ever did that, because what happened was she was doing well. She was doing well. Then she had a big setback, and then it just kind of went from bad to worse. And so no one ever said, okay, this is it. You probably aren't going to make it. And by that time, where it was pretty evident she wasn't going to make it, she was in, kind of hooked up to IVs and a lot of pain and things. So we never had that conversation. And
It wasn't in her vernacular. That's not where she wanted to go with it.
No, I mean, the nurses around her in the hospital before she died, the doctor, they said they'd never seen anybody fight like she did. And I remember, like, a week before, someone had said to me, they said, sometimes when someone is dying, you have to kind of give them permission,
right?
That, like, to say to them, you can make a choice and it's okay. So they're not like holding on for other people or, and I said something like that to her, and I was holding her hands in the hospital, and she said, no, she said, I want to stay and fight. And I said, good, I'm right here with you.
That is just, and such a personal choice, right? It's everybody's personal journey, how you want to handle it. My friend in particular wants to talk about it. So I just listen to her and we discuss it, but that's important to her. And then for somebody else, that's just not going to be the right path. And just a quick question, because you were back and forth between the US and Germany, and it seemed her treatments went further in Germany. And she came back and had setbacks in LA. Did you see a big difference? What were your feelings on that? Did you prefer one over the other, or did it? I mean, they're very different treatments.
I feel like if she had stayed longer in Germany and just done their treatments there, I feel like she might have prolonged her life. And the reason I say that is because we came back and she did a trial that she'd been reading about, and she really wanted to do it. And it was a specific trial, and she kind of convinced everyone, her doctors and everything, that this was what she wanted to do. And that trial was not good. It wasn't good. In fact, it made her so much worse. It's so much worse. That's when it all started to really go downhill. And but we did not talk about her dying, and she didn't want to, she wanted to go out and go shopping and have a good
for Jaguars, and then go to Mercedes. I love that story.
Yeah,
I love
we
that
went
story.
one day after she just had this test and got this kind of bad result from the test, this, not good feedback. We were supposed to go, and she was supposed to lease a new car. And so was I. And I said, well, you probably don't want to go today. She said, no, I do. I want to go. And it was like saying, yeah, I'm going to lease a car. I'm going to do a 3 or 4.
For how many years? That was funny. How many years?
I'm not going anywhere. And that was her attitude. But she didn't want to live like a cancer patient. She wanted to do fun things. She wanted to go and have Mexican food and a margarita and go shopping and do girls' things. And that's why I say our trips to Europe sometimes were like 2 girlfriends going on a trip to Europe,
I love that camaraderie. And I'm reading your book, and I don't know why I cried with this. I have no idea. Maybe you can explain it to me, but you write a passage in the book about you two in Malibu, which is, I just love it. So magical and beautiful. And I think you might've been at her house or Ryan's house, and you just have this perfect day. Like, you soak up the sun, you cook dinner, you might've gone out for dinner, but then maybe you decided to stay home and just had this beautiful day together. And it was so simple and so profound and just about connections, and it seemed like a transformative day for you guys. It was just, and that's what friendship is, right? It was just like this, you knew each other so well, each other's rhythms. You didn't really want to go out for dinner. You wanted to stay home. You just wanted to lie in the sun, read your magazines. And the simplicity was beautiful.
Well, and she talked a lot about, she started the foundation that I'm now president and CEO of. She started that right after she was diagnosed with cancer. And we did talk a lot about what she wanted to do, and she wanted to really push, research for under-researched cancers, which anal cancer was, and when she came out very openly about anal cancer, I think that was so helpful to so many people, because there were so many people that have anal cancer tend to be ashamed
How
of.
rare is that cancer?
Well, it's not that rare anymore, but it's not it's not, certainly not breast cancer or colon cancer, but it's definitely not, a mainstream cancer. And people that have it tend to be ashamed and embarrassed to say that they had it. And I think she kind of took a lot of the onus off of this particular cancer. And so she started the foundation, and her intention was to run the foundation, and that her friends would all be on the board, and we would all help. And she wanted to go to Washington and sort of do things to push cancer research and cancer drugs and the prices of cancer drugs. And, she was always kind of what's the word I'm looking for? She was,
Trailblazer?
yeah, trailblazer, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
She did that when she did Burning Bed. She
Right.
changed
She's
the law.
brave. She's
They
brave
changed the laws in California
for
about
domestic violence, right?
domestic abuse because
Yeah.
of her. And the same thing with privacy laws in the medical community. She had a lot to do with changing that as well. And so she was a trailblazer, and she wanted to do all these things. So when she died, they asked me to be president of this foundation and run it. And I thought, I don't have any idea of how to do this. I mean, I've never done anything like this. It's not anything that I particularly had ever wanted to do. But I do know that I had a session with Marianne Williamson one day, and this was before Farah got sick. And I was saying to her, I feel like I need to get the focus off me, because we had a conversation about that, and she gave me this prayer, and it was a beautiful prayer. It was like, let me see if I can remember. It was like, God, help me to be the woman, show me how to be the woman that you want me to be, to do the things that you would have me to do. It was something along those lines, like, show me how to be the woman who can do what you would have me do.
Your greatest good, the greatest good you can do.
Yeah. And so I started to realize that my life was very inner focused. It was very focused on me. It was very focused on my kids, but it was about me and my little small universe. And I felt like I've got to do something. I need to find something. I don't know if it's children. I don't know what it is. I need to do something to give back. I'm too focused on me. And then Farah got sick. And Marianne and I had just had that conversation a few months before. And then I just got completely involved with her. I didn't even think about that. And then it was sort of, a natural progression, I guess, to then run her foundation and be doing what I'm doing, which it was a whole career that I had never, ever envisioned for myself.
Right. And really, from such an authentic place, your best friend passed the torch to you. This journey you had together, you learned so much. I mean, in the book, so many pivotal points where you had a completely different outtake on life, and then to run her foundation is to keep on the journey. It's amazing. And I do have this question, just because we're so obsessed with this, and you both were such beautiful women. It's a funny question, but did you ever talk about your beauty, the access, or I know she kind of rejected it a bit in her career. Was she ever worried? Were you guys ever worried about not being beautiful? Do you ever talk about that? We're so obsessed with it in our culture now. I'm just wondering if that was part of your, lexicon when you were together.
I think we discussed, that much about beauty and aging. I mean, I'm just trying to think, I mean, sometimes we would talk about, oh, what are we, this is the latest skincare thing, or hey, I just found this to do this. But the deeper aspect of it, and how it affects you emotionally, I don't think so much. Farah was not a very, how can I say this? She'd never gone to therapy. She was a very kind of straightforward, what you see is what you get. She was very, well, she was religious in that she was a Catholic. She would go to mass, and but she wasn't someone who delved deep into their emotional trauma.
Right.
Do you know what
Interesting. Totally, completely, completely.
It just wasn't who she was,
Right, right, right. That's fascinating. Wow.
She was a very simple and yet a very complicated woman.
Yeah, steely. She seems to me steely underneath this exterior steeliness.
She
I,
was
I
she was determined, and I won't use the word tough because that sort of has this connotation that that it's not a good thing, but steely is a good word. She was tough, and I have that side to me that's tough. I prefer to say strong,
yeah,
to tough.
resilient, strong. You can see it in both of you, the Texan ladies
Yeah.
with the big hair, which I relate to. I love your whole story around Marianne Williamson, and I know you supported her at one point when I think she was initially running. So I have a question for you. How can we be better? We are such a divided country, and I'm actually enjoying a lovely relationship right now with a conservative. And I'm sort of in the middle, but it's a real learning experience because I have to listen, which I like. I'm learning. I can't be triggered. We have conversations and we move on. And there's so much diversity in this country. And how do we move forward with kindness and respect? I'm learning those skills because it's important. And how do we do that? How can we be better?
It's tough. I'm going to tell you something. I'm just the opposite. I'm a conservative, and I live in a very, very liberal town.
That's what Exactly.
And
yeah.
And some of my very best friends are, Farah was more like me. I would say her parents, her dad was a Democrat, but he was more like a blue dog Democrat, Southern Democrat. So he wouldn't be one today, I don't think. But so all of my friends are liberals, and some of them I cannot talk politics with. We cannot have a conversation about politics because they are very, very close-minded.
Right.
And sometimes the people that are supposed to be the most open-minded, if you know what I mean.
I do.
Close-minded.
I do. Yeah.
And when I hear something, I like to go into it and look at it, whether somebody says something about climate change. Okay, so I like to go into it and research it and get different points of view and hear different scientists and what their take on it is, and maybe come up with my own feelings about it. But I'm open to hearing things. A lot of the people I know are not open to hearing anything,
Well, when you're in your echo chambers, you're not. And so I am learning. It's a great learning curve for me,
I imagine, I mean, a guy with it's, to be with a guy who's the opposite politically.
Yeah. I mean, we have some things in the middle, but he's opposite politically. So we have discussions about it, which is really interesting. And I actually have a friend I know who would probably not even allow him in her house because he's conservative. And I'm like, so I know what you're talking about because
I have a Zoom call that I do every week with a group of friends of mine that are very, very liberal. and they, they'll say, well, we can't talk politics because Alana, is here, and she, they'll say it, out of not out of respect, like I'm going to get angry. And I go, no, you can actually talk about that. I'm okay. I'm okay with hearing your point of view because I respect you. And I respect that you're allowed to have a different point of view than me.
You're not that fragile. So my basis is if I respect and care about somebody and I know that they're a good person, if their opinions are different, I can deal with it. It's
So,
okay. I can deal
and
with
I
it.
can still love that person and care about them. But there's some people that have a lot of trouble with it, a lot of trouble.
Well, that's the source of everything. That's the source of everything. So that's been an interesting trajectory. But I have two more questions for you. You've been so generous with your time. I could talk to you forever because you're just fascinating. So my final two questions are, what is the beauty in aging? And my second is, what is your motto and has it changed?
I I don't know that I've ever had a motto, but I would say if how I try to live my life is one day at a time. And I try to live in the present. I don't always do it, but if I'm in my head living in the future, I'm probably going to be living in fear and
Right.
anxiety. And if I'm living in the past, I'm going to be living in something that's already happened. I'm either in regret or sadness or you know um, wishing things were different or like they used to be. So I think the only way you can get through, or I can get through life, is to live in the present and get up every day and see this as a new day and a new beginning, and live it one day at a time, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, look at what happened with Farah.
I know, or my friend, who knows?
Yeah.
So maybe the beauty of aging is living in the moment.
I think the beauty of aging is you're not 30 anymore, or in your 20s, or in that period of time where you were so anxiety ridden. I mean, not everybody is, but I think so many young people are so anxiety ridden, especially today. I mean,
Mhm.
they don't know who they are. They don't know what they're supposed to be or think or do. And I think even in my day, there was still a certain amount of that, because you hadn't you hadn't delved into yourself to know what, to face your demons and all those things. And so I think the beauty of aging is being able to look back and go, wow, I'm not that person anymore. I'm this person, and I have tools. I have tools when life hits when there's a rut in the road. I have like a tools to deal with it. I didn't have tools then. I just would
Yeah.
like, oh God, what am I going to do? Or I'd have to get someone to try to help me, or depend on a therapist or a spiritual person to get me through this. Now, if something happens, I know that I have tools, and I can go inside and, pull something up and go, okay, hey, I've been through this before. This is what I need to do.
You can depend on yourself, the relationship you have with yourself.
And I think if there's beauty in aging, for me, that's it.
Yeah, me too. That's the best. It's work in progress all the time, which makes it so curious and interesting. I think this part of life, I call it the curiosity landscape. I love it because a lot of things, I say it's a lot easier to say yes to things, and it's a lot easier to say no, because you know where you're coming from. So I think it's just a beautiful space. And I've loved speaking to you today. And I think Farah summed it up best when she wrote you a birthday note, and she was just saying what a sweet, dear friend you were, and that you're as beautiful on the outside as you are on the inside.
Oh,
And
that's
you just are. So we have loved talking to you. I just use the royal we. I have loved speaking to you today, and you had so many important things to say that women need to hear. So thank you.
I would love for people to, if they're interested, to go to our website, the farrahfawcettfoundation.org, because there's a lot of information on there. There's also people can buy things. We have wonderful t-shirts and sweatshirts and things. And, proceeds are part of the proceeds go to the foundation. And or they can donate, or they can learn a lot about, especially if somebody's battling cancer or knows someone who's battling cancer. We have resources and things on there. So I would just like to let everybody know that it's the farrahfawcettfoundation.org.
And you guys have a big gala coming up. Do you in Dallas?
We do in Dallas on September 28th. Yes.
I'm going to try and come with my friends.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, with Cliff Lofton and Hillary Williams.
What, is Hillary Williams a friend of yours?
Yes,
Hillary, the Hank Williams?
yes,
daughter?
yes.
Oh my God, I just spoke to her on the phone the other day. She's a really close friend. Of course, that's how we
That's
got.
how we connected. But I spent time with her in Montana. I fell in love with her. She is amazing woman.
I completely forgot that that's how we connected. Oh my God.
That's how we connected. So she's a blast.
My
She's
son
a
loves her.
blast.
We're very good friends. And he
Yeah.
connected me with her because we were looking for an entertainment for our event. That's so funny. Yeah, she was just great.
She's wonderful. And I wanted to have her on to introduce us, but we'll do something in the future. But she told me about the gala. So we're all going to try and make it. I would love to go. So
That would be fantastic. I'll make sure that we send you an invitation.
please, I would be proud to be there. I would love it. I would love it.
Okay. All right. Well, I really enjoyed talking to you, and maybe I didn't realize you were in Los Angeles, so maybe we'll get to meet one of these days.
Yeah, maybe we'll grab a coffee. We'll talk politics. Not. It's okay.
Well, I have a feeling we could talk to each other, like objectively and not
Yeah.
slit
Yeah.
each other's throats.
Oh, no, those days are gone. Those days are gone. But anyway, thank you again for your time and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much. I really
Okay.
appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.